So I'd like to welcome everybody to our Watershed Talks. This is a program with the Iowa division of the Izaak Walton League, and I'm Christine Curry, the outreach coordinator of the Iowa division. And I'd like to welcome everybody this evening. Thank you so much for taking time to meet with us this evening. And I know everybody has like a million other things they could be doing, so it's always fun to see everybody taking time to join us. So this evening we have the privilege and opportunity to meet with Beth Hoffman, and Beth is going to be talking about her Iowa adventures. She's an author, a writer, and a podcaster, and a farmer here in Iowa now. And Beth, I'll just let you introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background about what you've been doing. And then I'll have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask just to kind of get our discussion going.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me here. And hi to people I know here, Denise and Mike and, people, Iowa Farmers Union folks mainly. Yeah, so I guess I don't know exactly where you'd like me to start, but ask me questions about whatever I'm not talking about that you want to hear about.
Okay.
Um, I was a food and agriculture reporter for many years. I moved to Berkeley to go to school. So mainly I could have a master's so I could teach at a college level and met my husband, who is my neighbor, my now husband. And as soon as I met him, he had said he was going to move back here, but I didn't really think about it. His kids at the time were about 7 and 9 years old. And so it was like, oh, whatever, when they're grown, we'll deal with that then. And they grew and it came around like it was time to move to Iowa. And we had spent a lot of summers out here. And just, to be clear too, I had moved a lot. I had grown up in New Jersey. I was born in New York. I went to college in Atlanta. I lived many years in Colorado and in Utah. I moved to the Bay Area. So it was not like so surprising that I would get up and move again. I think it's kind of an adventure to live in lots of different places. And, I was a little bit, I'm quite progressive myself, in my sort of political stance, but I was a little bit fed up with like the Bay Area self-righteousness, I would call it. It's a lot of like, I'd write something and people would be like, well, I shop at the farmer's market. And I was like, well, that's not the point about the food system and the problems we're having. Like, we're not all gonna suddenly go to the farmer's market around the whole world. So, I was a little bit ready for that shift anyway. Luckily, I have been teaching audio production actually at University of San Francisco as a full-time professor there. And, it was very lucky because I could not have imagined teaching audio production during COVID like via this way, like that would have it would have been crazy. I think I would have no interest in that whatsoever. So we moved here 2018, 19. We lived in John's sister's basement initially. We then lived in a tiny house on the farm, like no running water. That was a crazy experiment. And we redid this farmhouse. And pretty much right off the bat, I mean, John's dad, in my book, I talk at length about this, and I know a lot of you have read the book, so I'm not going to bore you with all of those details. But John's dad was here still farming. He had been farming 50 years or so by then. He was soybean, cattle, conventional farmer. There's my book.
I'm Vanna
Uh,
White tonight.
and he was initially very skeptical about what we would do. We kind of walked in and were like, "Oh, no chemicals and organics," and he was just like, what does this, city lady know? She knows nothing. I've been here for 50 years on this land." So it was a huge learning curve, both on our side and on Leroy's side, John's dad, to try and figure out how was this going to work? How could we transfer the land? As most of you are probably well aware, most farmers are land rich, cash poor. So it wasn't like he could just walk away and retire to Florida with his, 401k and we would take over. So we had to figure out a lease and we had to figure out, how could the whole transfer happen? Um, we bought the cattle from him. We decided pretty much right off the bat we weren't interested in the kind of conventional model where we were going to, I mean, John's dad used to have them in until basically he put them in a field until they got out, and then he would move them. And we decided that we would do rotational grazing, and so we moved them and moved them and moved them. Um, and when we got to the point where it was time to sell them at like 9 months or so, we kind of were like, do we really just drive up to the sale barn and drop them off and they just, nobody knows how they were raised and that's it? It just felt really weird. And just we had so much more kind of pride of workmanship, it's like we wanted people to know what we had done and how we had raised them. So we switched to a different model, and again, in the book, there's excruciating detail probably about how that does work and doesn't work to be able to do something different in the state. There's not there's not a great setup for the infrastructure here to grow anything but corn and beans. And there's a very solid, infrastructure for growing corn and beans. If we had, corn the end of the season, it's all figured out, how we would harvest it and spray it and plant it and get it, get it to the local elevator, wherever we were going to bring it, Cargill. Um, so we had to kind of reinvent that wheel. Luckily, we had people like Denise and Larry who had really, kind of paved a lot of the way for people doing this kind of work. But it's each person who wants to direct market beef then is not only a farmer, you're a marketer, you're a website designer, you're a distributor. So it's kind of an interesting scenario of like how much we've learned in that. But I'll let you ask questions because I don't know what people want to hear about.
Oh, I think that's fantastic.
The five, Andy four, race
Whoop.
the Andy five.
We had Mike just join us. We have some of our familiar peeps on this evening and some others. So Beth, I'm really that was really a great background of your arrival here in Iowa and what you've learned about the food and farming culture here and how you're working to, make it a thriving and sustainable and equitable food system. And the the different people that you've been working with too, as far as like through the Iowa Farmers Union, and then the food co-op that you're involved with too, and then part of the podcast that you're doing is because of learning about all these things, and you're trying to share those experiences through the podcast. So
I
can
can
you
talk a
just
little bit about that. Yeah, I'm a board
yeah.
member with the Iowa Farmers Union. But I also do communications with the Iowa Food System Coalition. So that's who the podcast is through that. And that kind of came about as, there's like 40 partners that belong to the coalition. And they all have just amazing stories. I mean, so many different issues and it's a pretty common thread in kind of the food movement world, for lack of a better term, where we all keep thinking, we've got to really educate people. We've got to let them know some of this information. And while that's true, I think, and I know Tanya thinks this as well on this call. It has to be presented in a way that's interesting and well produced. Um, because there's just too many things out there battling for our attention, and especially right now, things have gotten kind of crazy. So, trying to understand what's the implications of what's going on politically, or what's, you know, what excuse
Bless
me,
you.
um, how is this going to actually impact us? It's really important. So that's part of what the podcast is about.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting how you put that together. I've listened to all of them, all of the collection, and just with what you're exposing people to are just spot on with everything that we're dealing with. The drenched in chemicals session that you had. Can you just share a little bit about that with everybody and how this impacts, the farmers here in Iowa for like and using this one as an example?
Yeah, and just a shout out, Denise O'Brien is writing about, the farmers union, and I feel like I agree with her. I think it's just such an important organization in the state because there's a lot of food, there's a lot of different food groups doing great work, but not a lot of them are political and get involved in policy. And it's not so much like one candidate or whatever. It's a lot of, we do a lot of lobbying about policies. So
Mhm.
um yeah, so the episode that I did that was called Drenched in Chemicals, it was about the story, it was around the story of Rob Fox, which I'm not sure many of you probably know who he is. He works for the Pesticide Action Network. And my this is a chronic problem. Excuse me.
Yes.
Um, so he works for the Pesticide Action Network, but part of the reason why he works for them is because he had his own terrible incident where he had an organic farm. They were farming. They were out on the farm. They had like 120 CSA members, meaning that people had pre-bought for the season, and then they were going to get a food box each week. And they were out in the field. They were actually like putting chickens away or something, and a plane came flying over, spraying his neighbor's fields, and he had brought a camera out him just in case, like, somebody's whatever, some spray kind of came over. But this plane flew directly over him, and just doused them all in chemicals. I mean, it ended up actually passing, I guess they were at the edge of the field. So then the plane just flew right over them and turned around 12 times. And they were literally like drenched in chemicals, is how he described it, and had to call the doctor, like, what are we supposed to do? And they said, well, get in the shower. We said, for how long? And he was told at least a half an hour, like just stand in there until, and he ended up having some issues in the longer term. He ended up actually having kidney cancer, but it's very, very hard, as we are all familiar in this state. It's very hard when you're exposed to chemicals. We all are, just
Mhm.
constantly, because the chemicals are sprayed everywhere all the time. Um, it's hard to say this is where it came from.
Right.
So part of the issue now is that Bayer, mainly, who bought Monsanto, which is the owner of Roundup. So Roundup uses glyphosate. He actually explained some interesting things to me. I did not put in the podcast because
Too
it got
complicated.
a lot of science to it, and I couldn't actually figure out how to put in it. But it's actually not the glyphosate; it's the surfactant that is in Roundup that is the chemical that has been part of these lawsuits that's now totaling in the billions of dollars for Monsanto slash Bayer. But now, in order to limit their liability, because these lawsuits are just out of control, there's something like 65,000 of them still in the courts right now, with new ones kind of being added. They now, in order to limit their liability, they are working really hard to end the ability to sue. So they have introduced in the Iowa legislature and in like 8 other states, like Missouri, North Dakota. I don't remember the whole list, but they've proposed legislation that says that whatever is on the label is enough warning. So regardless of what the label actually says, that's fine. It just you have enough warning. And so you can't really sue. You can sue, but it's not going to get anywhere, because they won't be held liable for it. So basically what happened in a lot of those lawsuits is that it's been determined that they have known some of the problems that there are with the chemicals and continued to have them anyway in the products, so that they were not telling people on the label what the actual problems are. Now it was defeated. It went through the Senate here. It was defeated in the House, I believe. Yes, it was defeated in the House, but or it was actually never came up for onto the floor of the House. It went to committee and it never got past that this year. But this is the second year they brought it to Iowa. And now it's likely that they will be aiming higher to just have it as a federal law to be written into the farm bill, if there's a farm bill, or to pass it in some federal way. It strikes me as, super ironic because of the movement also to get rid of any kind of chemicals in food. So all the food additives and dyes, that's like gotten on a big roll. So many states have passed that now, that we're not allowed to have red dye number or whatever in our
40.
food. But yet we can spray this everywhere and, think that that's going to be okay. And I think people haven't really, I do think that this is a very, not having these kinds of laws, I think, is much more popular. I think they're not popular to say that chemical companies should not be responsible. I don't think that's a popular thing in the general public, but I don't think that they actually understand the links. Because a lot of legislators, when we've been up at lobby days, a lot of them are saying things like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal, this bill. Oh, it's like, and so because I think there's lobbyists there 24/7, basically, from Bayer. And that's what they're doing, out to lunch or whatever lobbyists do with them. So they're just being told again and again, oh, it's not that big of a deal.
Right, that it's safe. And we know that there's definitely some implications that have hardcore facts. I mean, there's
Yeah,
been,
I mean, I think there's this ongoing debate about glyphosate. I think that there's, it kind of, people make some very good arguments on all sides, but especially saying things like, well, glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in some Roundup, actually, I have to say that in some kinds of Roundup that you can buy, like for your home, apparently it doesn't have glyphosate in it anymore. They've changed some of the actual uh, recipes for it.
well,
So that's it. Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
here's
I mean, so
one
there's
that,
versions of why you would argue like that we have to have these kind of laws to protect glyphosate. And that's part of the marketing out there is like farmers have to have glyphosate. It's the most important tool. We have to be able to have this in our at our disposal. But it's really, I mean, Rob Fox was making the point to me, glyphosate is also kind of might be ending its life with us right now because weeds have gotten really resistant to it. The effectiveness of it has waned. And so for him, he was saying, and it's part of the podcast, that the real problem is that we can't have this kind of law going forward for any kind of chemical that would be created, anything on the market. We can't hold companies liable. That makes no sense.
Mhm.
So it's not just a glyphosate issue.
Right. That's that's really good. Yeah, I found this I printed this out and I took it up to Costco. They stopped selling glyphosate and they're still selling Roundup with a 45 times more toxic formula. And this was from the organic consumers and also backed by Friends of the Earth. And so I think the public is still um, there's still a lot of people that are aware that there's some potential problems, but the average person thinks that it's okay because you see everybody's out with their bottle of Roundup and just passively using that little spray bottle on our dandelions and everything else in the yards. Um, and
Yeah,
it,
I think, the problem is really, and I guess what I started saying before too is that um when glyphosate was listed by the World Health Organization as a potential or possible, I forget what the
carcinogen.
exact wording is, carcinogen. And the argument lots of people make is like, well, so is everything is on that list. And it is a very, very long list of possible toxins, and it includes lots of things that are in our everyday lives. The problem is this repetitive, constant use of glyphosate that's everywhere, and especially in places like Iowa, when it's used on corn and beans. It's just that fact that we are constantly inhaling it. We are constantly, it's, shows up in water supplies. It's like, that's the problem. So when we say yes, a little, and people always like to say, I could drink glyphosate, that was
Right,
always the big thing, right? Um, sure, but would you be drinking it if you drank it every day for 30 years? What would that do to your body? That's really the point, is like, it's this constant exposure that we have. So when it says something like a chemical is 40 times more toxic, I mean, I want to know more about that. I don't kind of take that at face value. I want to know, like, what do you mean? What kind of toxicity to what, in what format? Where did that information come from?
yeah,
So
they have studies backed in this too,
yeah.
that are they're cited. So
Mhm.
I tend to believe scientists myself.
Yeah, but yeah, anyway, what a study
Yeah,
is, and if it's peer reviewed, and then
right,
UFO, I mean, there was this like glyphosate study with these mice, and that's been cited 1,000 times, but that was actually, that study had lots of problems, and there was all these scientists that didn't like that science, and so, you kind of have to sometimes dig deeper in it
right.
to understand what is the actual problem. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's not my area of expertise.
No, I know you mentioned that, but thank you for doing that podcast on it. I think it's good because it does with all of us in Iowa, we're surrounded by this and with the birds and the bees and our pollinators that are no longer showing up in masses like they used to. There is a problem on our landscape. So we'll be um, talking about that next month, actually, with our on nicotinoids. Um, so, Beth, what about? I was really interested in your other podcast about, the with this company, Early Morning Harvest. I saw them at the Practical Farmers of Iowa, and then I was at natural grocers, and I was looking for buckwheat flour, and I found, oh my God, here's an Iowa company. And I was so happy to see this on the shelf. Can you just share a little bit about how difficult it is for our local companies to get something like this on one of our local shelves?
Yeah, I mean they so Early Morning Harvest, Paha cider, which is part of I want to say it, their farm is called something else, not Paha. I think it's Solstice Farm. Um, I featured them in a podcast about adding value and the fact that excuse me, you think about land and land prices in Iowa and cough. All right, the land prices in Iowa, I mean, you can see now, um, 10, 15, 20, 22, $25,000 an acre land can go for. And you think about what's being grown on it, right? So, a bushel of corn right now, I think, like if you have, I think an average is something like 200 bushel per acre. So you've paid $15,000 for your acre. You can raise 200 bushels and you might get right now, I don't know, 550 or something. So let's say it's like $1,000 you can make off of an acre of land, and that's before you add in like how much you spend on seeds. And so it's like the math does not work out, right? There's not, the return on investment is never. And it's basically like you have land for investment purposes, right? You're like, it's worth a lot of money, and it's probably going to retain a lot of the money. And especially when we get into an economy where stocks become very volatile, land always is the thing that money goes into. I've seen this multiple times now, even in my 30 years of reporting on food. It's like, all of a sudden investors turn there and, oh, because it's going to retain its value. Anyway, so the idea that then we could take, we're selling off raw materials from our land, be it corn or even wheat. In the case of Early Morning Harvest, they had of 1,000 acres or so, 1,500 acres they were growing grain on. And it just kind of occurred to him, hey, I could put up another grain bin to store this until a price is at a good price, or I could probably spend that same amount of money and start milling the wheat here on my farm. And that's called adding value added product, where, that 1 pound of wheat flour is worth more than probably a bushel of wheat many times over. So, I mean, even if you think about that example of corn, 54 pounds of corn in a bushel, and let's say you're getting $5. Well, one box of corn flakes is not, I don't even know if there's a pound of corn in there, is like $5.50. So
Mhm.
you're multiplying it many, many times. And what happens is when we're producing the raw materials on the farm, making so little for them and then shipping them away, and some kind of manufacturer is making all of the money on it, that's where we're losing money basically as farmers. Um, so the idea that they had was to mill their own, and so they started doing that, and they've been really successful. They actually just got another value added grant, at that both of those companies, Paha Cider and Early Morning Harvest, were both awarded value added grants from Choose Iowa. So part of what we were trying to say is how much that makes sense to do, because we keep a lot of the economics, we keep a lot of the money here in the state. It's paying our farmers more. And but the value added grant with Choose Iowa, they had like 4 times the amount of farms apply this year as they gave out money. So we were actually one that we did not get the grant. And we had really a very strong proposal that when we looked through the review of it, it basically was like, we just don't have enough money to fund all these. So, they found, tiny little like, oh, you could have talked about this more kind of,
Oh,
responses. So, I mean, what that really indicates is that we have a lot of farms in this state that are ready to take that next step and to produce more food. And that's honestly mostly, table food that we can actually eat, whereas the corn and the soybeans that we grow is not feed it can't feed a single human, even if
that's
we're feeding the world, right?
that's the whole point. And I just wrote Zach Nunn a letter back to his response that he sends out to his constituents, and he always puts in there, we feed the world. And I wrote him back and I said, no, that's not true. That it would be really nice if you could find another, talking point besides that. And
Yeah.
and the reason it's not true is because the food is we do have enough food in the world. It's a distribution problem and so forth, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, yes and no. It's like here in Iowa, um, when you think about the idea that we have all this farmland, some of the best soil in the whole planet, and then we are exporting all of that. I mean, it's all of the stuff that we're growing is basically leaves our state and um feeds cattle, feeds our cars with ethanol and so forth, or with even hogs, we're like shipping them out and it's for multinational companies. So, yes, there might be, quantity wise enough food, quote unquote, but really, if we got into a situation where we had trade wars, where we have another pandemic, where, we can't import 90% of our food, which is what we do, at thereabouts, that's a very difficult data point to actually find. Nobody has the actual data point,
Hmm.
but it's probably somewhere around 90% of the food because there's not, if you go to the supermarket, there may be one or two products from Iowa, very, very, very few products from Iowa.
Hmm.
So, and I know that Capital City Fruit, they've said that in the summertime, almost all of the produce that they deliver to Hy-Vee to all over. They're one of the huge distributors in the Midwest. It's all regional and almost none of it comes from Iowa.
Hmm.
So we are importing all the food. And if you think about how much, again, if we're making 5.50 a bushel on corn, and yet we're spending, whatever, $2.50 on an avocado or on the lettuce, all the stuff that we're buying at the store, we're just shipping our money out of state. So no, I would say the argument is we don't grow enough in our state. We need to have more food farming in Iowa to actually feed the state and the region. We don't have enough.
So, so farmers could be profitable if they had the subsidies to help them get started, just like the commodities do, like for corn and bean. There's all kinds of financial support systems for people that want to do farming for those production or commodity, like the corn and beans, right? But if
Yeah, I
they,
mean, I think that there's been some sizable difficulties, obviously, with distribution, and I'm sure, Denise and Larry could probably talk our ears off about the problems that they've had, getting product to people.
Mhm.
So even if they maybe had more government subsidies, and that's a very kind of, it's a confusing term because
Well,
some
support,
of it
just
is
say
direct, but a
support.
lot of it is in insurance and that kind of stuff, subsidized insurance.
Right.
So like right now, we subsidize corn and bean insurance for at like 65-70% of the whole premium we pay for as taxpayers.
Mhm.
And they want that to be higher. So it's looking like in the new farm bill that'll be, Grassley's asking for like 85% or something. So yes, we would like more of that. I was on a call once with people from USDA who were saying that there are more products available for smaller scale farms, for specialty crops, but it's very hard to access. And now that we have literally, our USDA office was gutted. I mean, I think there's maybe one person working in there now. We had our NRCS person who's left, it was out on maternity leave. So I think that leaves literally no one at the NRCS at our office. So I don't know who you would ask to find
Mhm.
any of those programs. I mean, I just don't think that there's the ability to get that kind of information out anymore without them hiring a whole lot more people. But Secretary Rollins apparently just announced, like yesterday, Nebraska, like small farms are now the focus, is what she says, and food farming. So we'll see. They're apparently doing all this stuff for like land access. And I mean, she did her homework to know what the actual issues are, but I don't know if they actually have any kind of real plan. And they're talking about like the definition of small needs to be reassessed because it's now at like $350,000 gross sales, I think, is considered small. And I think they want to raise that. So, I mean, yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know that the old system was working, so
Right.
I don't know that gutting it was the maybe the worst thing to do, but I don't know. I don't think that what will come in its place is going to be helpful. And I think we lost to just so many smart science-based people that worked for the USDA. They're just gone. So that institutional knowledge, I don't know how you get back to that.
Yeah, that's really, really sad. I think at this point, there's probably some other questions. We have a few comments in the chat box too. And so I want to make sure we give some others some time. Denise, you probably have a few more words. It looks like you just posted about the infrastructure for supporting the food system is non-existent, just like Beth said, and processing, storage, and marketing is
Well,
a
I
problem.
want to make a comment about that though. And I did a podcast about food hubs.
Yeah.
And that was one of the great things that did come out of the funding. We used to have funding for local food to schools and local food purchasing assistance program that went to food banks and that kind of stuff, food pantries. And that system was very helpful in getting those institutions locally grown food. But perhaps even more importantly is they really forced the food hubs around the state. There's like I think maybe 8 of them to start working together, to start distributing throughout the state. They got kind of a distribution route and trucks going, and you could move things around. And so the infrastructure was, took a tiny step forward. There was supposed to be this infrastructure grants that people applied for and got, and then was canceled. Those would have also helped, kind of institutionalize some of this a bit more. But yes, if Denise, if you wanted to comment, feel free.
Well, Larry and I've been working on this for a long time, and I just think of all the years that we've made attempts, we've made, baby steps. We've never had this just, you know, to be able to upscale. It's such hard work just to farm, but then to have to market it and have to store it and have to process it and everything. The margins are so small that we've lost every year we lose young farmers because of the low pay and exhaustion. And so it's one of those things that it really has to be dealt with. And I think Iowa, if we had some visionary thinkers in our in our Department of Ag and that, we could become, a food hub for the Midwest. I was on the first food policy council that was established during Governor Vilsack's time in 1998, I believe it is. We had the first Iowa Food Policy Council, and Neil Hamilton was the chair of it. And we had transportation. We had all these Iowa State and everybody coming in. And actually, to grow all the food for Iowans, we had it down to how many acres per county we needed to be able to feed that county. So that information is out there someplace. And I haven't seen it for a while, I haven't looked for it, but it's not as much as you think it would be. And it would be, you know people are getting ready. We have a young couple up the road from us. They want to scale up, they want to stop, they want a full-time farm. And um and they're just having a lot of difficulty. They have to have that off-farm job. And that's what exhausts people, raising a young family. If we had, I feel like if we had universal health care, and if we had college debt forgiveness, which are not even on the radar anymore, those two things would really help to be able to establish farmers.
The getting young farmers back out to the land, right?
Yeah,
And
on the land, and to be able to scale up so that they can make an income from it.
Real food.
Real food, yeah.
but Beth, what about the grant that you guys applied for and that you didn't get? Is that just a little pocket of money, but there's not like could that be expanded, or is it that's state money, right?
Well, it's a Choose Iowa program. It's through IDOLS. The program is a value added program, and basically, I'm not sure which part of it. The funding for Choose Iowa was made smaller this year, even still. So it's like $200,000 they gave
Oh.
to all of Choose Iowa. Um, so I don't really know. And then there was also one of the things that they had done last year was like a Choose Iowa purchasing pilot. So they had a program that they started that was like $70,000 went into it, that they gave to food banks to buy food from Choose Iowa farmers. And it was very successful. I mean, again, it was like, I mean, the food banks are getting money, some money and some grants, to purchase commodity crops, commodity food. So why not have that be local food? It made a lot of sense. And then you could help farms have that extra money to figure out this whole system to, get everything up and rolling. But it doesn't look like that will be around either. So I don't know.
It,
There's a lot of, I do think that, there's this whole, even if it's just rhetoric, this whole like make America healthy again, or make agriculture better again, or whatever they're using
right.
that whole whatever that shtick for everything. But it's it does point to the idea that it's a very popular, I think conservation is a very popular thing. And it is with evangelical Christians, it is with Republicans, it is with liberals. It's like it's a very common thread right now, and I think that that's what gives me a lot of hope is that I really feel like there's a way that we can utilize this popular movement, and not have it just stop at let's get rid of food dye number 5. We can have it actually mean something much more, in terms of regenerative agriculture and and having policy back those things. There's just a lot of rhetoric when you go up to the legislature. People talk about, oh, they're so, yes, we love farms, we love farming, we love, it's the Iowa's
Right,
farming. Everybody loves to see those barns when you drive around, and nobody wants to see just hog facilities, right?
right.
But
Want to see animals on the landscape like
yeah,
that
we want to
deer
see that.
farm.
We do. We all want that. That is part of our American cultural, vision of what we are. And yet, if we don't have people dotting the landscape, living in those barns and taking care of pigs on the landscape, that's gone. And I really don't think that's part of anybody's vision, is to get rid of all the farmers. And, one of my favorite things I ever wrote was, um, I've been asked a lot, like, oh, what do your neighbors think? Do they look over and like, oh, what are you crazy people doing over there? Farming organically or farming grass finished beef, and why are you moving the cows all the time? And I started asking neighbors, and I had a couple neighbors over to talk about it. A couple, and John's lived here. He knows all these people. They all are the same people, right? And they own a little feedlot, these people up the road. And I said to them, you what do you think? Are you looking at us like we're crazy? And they were like, we are so thrilled you're here, right? Like every other piece of land that comes up is bought by somebody who doesn't live anywhere near here,
Mhm.
or it's now owned by somebody's relatives who are in Chicago, and they're never here, and they just rent out the land. And they're like, you care, you're here, you care, you're making this place a better place, you're building things, you're putting money into this place. That's what we care about. We don't have to farm the same way. That has nothing to do with anything.
Oh, that's really, really nice to hear, Beth.
So I
That's
wrote I wrote an article about that. You could look that
that's
up.
great. That is really great. I love that. And we do have I do have hope because I'm a homecomer, as you know, and I've been back now close to 10 years, but I've been following this movement since I've been back, and it's just phenomenal to think that there's people like you and Denise and Chris and some of the other farmers that we know. It gives you hope, but it's just like, why? I mean, you guys haven't been, Denise, this has been your lifetime, and you haven't been able to fix this yet either, and I'm just a cheerleader on the sidelines, cheering for you and all the others that are trying to make uh, positive things happen on the landscape that benefit all of us in Iowa. It really does.
I don't
It's
think there's going to be like, I mean, I don't think that we're going to like massively shift everything. That's not, sort of, for me, that wouldn't be success, right? I mean, yes, that would be success, but that's not reality. And I think that the point of it, and I try and say this a lot, the point of it is just that a diversity of what you can grow benefits everybody. All the farmers that are out there who are in a, two crop or one crop rotation, it doesn't, you have no opportunity, you have no decision making, you've like lost all ability to actually have a freedom to farm whatever you want, because there's no options.
right.
So if we make something that has more options, and I think that Denise and Larry have been wildly successful, because there's a whole new generation of people, two generations probably below me, there's a whole nother generation of people, and there's more of those people than when they started. And there's things being figured out all the time. And I think that right now, I mean, you look on Netflix, it's not like it's super popular to be a corn farmer. There's not documentary after documentary and shows, and right?
Right,
It's like it's about people like Denise and Larry. That's what's popular. That's what's
right,
part of what people see that they're aspiring to. And I think that that's a huge cultural shift that's happened in the past, decade or two, maybe 20 years, is people know, like, organic, they know what organics mean. They buy organics, they look for it in the general public. Like, that's a thing that everybody knows about. Regenerative, farming is something that a lot of people know about now. So there's huge wins. It's just not, we can't all look out and see, oh, oh, my neighbors, they're doing something different now. That might not happen, maybe not ever. But that's change is slow.
I'd like to add something to that, in that what I've seen over the period of time, and we're in on the farm Larry grew up on. I was a town girl, so I've learned everything from Larry and from other farmers and things like that, over the years. But I think also, with losing the diversity of the land, you lose the diversity, you lose the opportunity to be creative. Farmer, the history of farmers is they're always inventing things to be able to do the job that needs to be done. And I think with having a formulaic type of farming, here's your seed, here's your, you see them all out in the fields now. The semi trucks come up and their tanks are full of water and chemicals, and you just do the same thing over and over. How boring is that? And it's just that sense of creativeness and thought and being in partnership is lost. And I think that's a real negative to, the farming community, that part of farming is lost.
Yeah, you see things like the Practical Farmers of Iowa, right? It's just grown and grown. I mean, it's huge. The conference now is huge.
Yeah, they had 1,200 people there and they have over 8,000 members now, they said. That's crazy.
Chris, did you want to ask something? No, maybe not. I just see her thing keep
Oh,
coming.
yeah. So I just want to make quick, just want to see, does anybody have any questions? Because we're getting toward the end of our hour. Well, we try to just stay on an hour. Every once in a while, we get a little carried away and chit chat a little longer. But does anybody have any questions for Beth or anybody else?
I did have my mic on, and what you probably heard was my hot water running for my tea. But I do have a comment on, even if you try to be diverse in regular farming, even if you try to be diverse, we tried to grow azuki beans and garbanzo beans and black beans as a cooperative venture. What we ran into is that the markets are there. The markets are there. The infrastructure for between the farmer and the market is what's missing. And I think even in fruits and vegetables, in fresh chicken, fresh turkey, that part of the infrastructure is so tenuous that one year you may have a processor and the next year you might not for your turkeys, unless you do it yourself. And now with the rules and regs the way they are, lots of those things that we used to take to farmers market without having regulation, on baked goods, for example, have all sorts of different rules and regs now that they haven't. It's not that it's bad, it's that it takes a certain economy of scale to make the infrastructure worthwhile. And about the time the market or the infrastructure starts to catch up, the administration changes, the ideas change, whatever. And that's what we ran into, that even though I was able to source somebody to bag an azuki bean and be able to put it on put it on a truck basically and send it to Yokohama. Even though I was able to find that one year, the next year I had to refine somebody else to do those same things. And it just is not easy to be the person who tries something new. It's not easy being the first adopters, and lots of people on this call are first adopters who still are out in front of the crowd and making things happen. So it's fun to hear what Beth has going on. It's always good to see Denise. And I've taken up your last 3 or 4 minutes, Christine. It's
Well,
always great to have you with your Watershed Talks. And yeah,
well,
I don't
thank
see anything else in the chat except the at the Iowa Farm Table, the Substack there, and I know Denise has a Substack. Iowa Writers Collaborative has several people who are involved in this kind of thing, and all sorts of good stuff going on. So.
Yep, I just put the link to At the Farm Table. So if everybody wants to copy that and share it out, we need to get several other people watching or listening to this and following Beth and everybody else that's putting in efforts. The more awareness that we share, especially with our other people who are just our neighbors, and just let them know, oh gosh, there's this great farm. We just took Curtis's little granddaughter out to visit Beth's farm she has all these darling baby goat kids, and we just had a blast, and it was a really great experience. And just sharing that experience and letting people know that, hey, you can go out and visit this farm and also pick up, this organic, sustainably raised meat, that you can taste the love in all the food that's grown with love. And that's really important.
I want to give, yeah, so the At the Iowa Farm Table is the podcast, and then I
Right.
put our farms link in there as well. And we raise grass-finished beef, goat, but we also do cooking classes. John is a trained chef. And so we do pasta making and sausage making, that kind of stuff. And we have an Airbnb that people can spend the night. But I think, Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, listen, I think this is a really great hour. I'm sorry it was a few minutes late, but has to be a political issue. We have to get these uh, issues front and center for the next election, the governor's election. Everybody is gung ho about Rob Sand, but Rob Sand has $7.5 million from his family that came from Iowa beef packing. And is Rob Sand gonna care about cleaning the water and caring about sustainable ag and fighting back CAFOs in this state? And I went to see a guy named Nathan Sage last night running for Senate, and he was really good. But I asked him to talk about water, and he didn't. He mentioned clean water, but not much about it. But I did get a call from J.D. Scholten last Friday, and he's going to be running for U.S. Senate. He's a member of the Iowa Farmers Union. So we need to ask our candidates at every level about what they're going to do about protecting independent family farmers, what they're going to do about our water quality, what are they going to do about our cancer rates. We need to squeeze their shoes about these issues. Thank you.
Every single party member. Matter of fact,
Absolutely.
I shared this talk on Rob Sand's Facebook page, and I said, I know Rob cares about our farming and healthy soil, clean water, and nutritious food.
Well, what's he going to do about it?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, of course, I hope a couple people liked it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I
Rob,
mean,
what's Rob going to do?
there's,
Yep.
I mean, even at the level of Vilsack, there wasn't much change. There were a lot of programs and a lot of activity and money.
Yeah.
Was there like vision and like let's move away from ethanol? Let's move away. I mean,
No.
his son, you know, is
Yeah.
one of the major pipeline companies. It's
Right.
like
He's the
it's
attorney for
just so
Summit.
I think we need, it's a good point, Mike, that we need people who actually take the time to know or learn about what's going on and do something. But yes, thank you all for coming. We'd love to see you all at the farm. And thanks, Christine, for organizing this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Beth. You bring so much to the table, and I highly recommend your book and supporting all the local things that we can and learn more from Beth at the Iowa Farm Table. So thank you. And this will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel, and it will be available to share. It's open to the public, and we have it on our iowaikes.com website. And so I should have it edited. So have a beautiful week, everybody. And thank you again. Thanks, Chris, for co-hosting, and everybody. It's great to see everybody. Thanks,
Thanks.
Heidi.
Bye
Heidi,
bye.
thanks for joining us, and Tamara and Rob and Tanya.